Sophia Bellini didn't see the threat coming. She only heard the warning, low, deliberate, laced with authority she couldn't ignore. "You're in danger," the man beside her whispered, his hand sliding to the small of her back with possessive certainty. "Pretend I'm your man." His touch was warm. His voice was ice. And the eyes watching from across the crowded gallery weren't looking at art anymore. They were looking at her. At him. At the lie that had just become her only shield. She didn't know his name yet. She didn't know what he'd done to earn the silence that followed him like a shadow. But she knew instinctively that the real danger wasn't across the room. It was standing right beside her. "Please like, share and subscribe." Sophia's breath caught as the man's hand remained steady against her spine, a brand of heat through the thin fabric of her dress. She forced herself to smile, to lean into him as if they'd done this 1,000 times before. Around them, the gallery hummed with polite conversation, champagne glasses clinking, heels clicking against marble floors. But the weight of unseen eyes pressed against her skin like a physical touch. "Who are you?" she whispered, barely moving her lips. "Someone who just saved your life." His voice was smooth, controlled, with the faint rasp of a man who didn't need to raise it to be obeyed. "Keep smiling, Bellissima. They're still watching." Sophia's gaze flickered to the cluster of men near the exit. 3 of them, dressed in expensive suits that couldn't quite hide the violence coiled beneath. The one in the center met her eyes for a fraction of a second before looking away. Her stomach twisted. "I don't understand." "You don't need to." His thumb brushed against her lower back, a gesture that could have been comfort or control. "All you need to do is trust me for the next 10 minutes. Can you do that?" She wanted to say no. Wanted to pull away, to demand answers, to run. But something in his tone, certainty, command, danger, made her nod instead. "Good girl." The words sent an unexpected shiver down her spine. He guided her deeper into the gallery with the ease of someone who owned every room he entered. Sophia caught fragments of their reflection in the polished surfaces. Her, dark-haired and wide-eyed, and him, tall and devastating in a black suit that looked tailored to emphasize the breadth of his shoulders. Ink peeked from beneath his cuffs, intricate patterns that suggested stories she probably didn't want to know. "What's your name?" he asked, his mouth close enough to her ear that anyone watching would think he was whispering endearments. "Sophia. Sophia." He repeated it like a verdict. Beautiful name for a beautiful woman who's made very dangerous enemies. Her heart stuttered. "I haven't made any enemies. I'm a curator. I catalog art." "I don't." "Your boss does." His hand tightened fractionally at her waist. "And you've been cataloging things you weren't supposed to see." The floor seemed to tilt beneath her feet. The ledger. The shipment manifests hidden in the estate collection she'd been hired to appraise last month. She'd thought they were old documents, meaningless paperwork mixed in with the art. She'd mentioned them to her supervisor, asked if they needed to be archived separately. "Oh God. I didn't know," she breathed. "I didn't." "I know." Something in his voice gentled just barely. "But they don't care about intentions, Bellissima. They care about loose ends." Minutes later he led her out of the gallery through a side entrance she hadn't known existed. The night air hit her face like a slap, cold and clarifying. A black car idled at the curb, sleek and expensive and somehow menacing in its stillness. "Get in." Sophia's feet rooted to the pavement. "I'm not getting in a car with a stranger." For the first time he smiled, a slow, dangerous curve of his mouth that did nothing to ease the predatory stillness in his dark eyes. "You have 2 choices, Sophia. Get in this car with me, or wait here for the men who were told to make sure you never leave this building alive." As if summoned by his words, the gallery's side door opened. The man in the center of the trio stepped out, his hand moving inside his jacket. Sophia dove into the car. The door slammed shut behind her, and then he was beside her, filling the space with his presence, his scent. Something dark and expensive that made her think of old churches and older sins. The driver pulled away from the curb with practiced speed, merging into traffic with the kind of precision that spoke of extensive training. "Who are you?" Sophia demanded, pressing herself against the opposite door. "Really?" He studied her for a long moment, his gaze traveling over her face with an intensity that made her feel stripped bare. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the weight of confession and threat in equal measure. "Luca DeSantis." The name meant nothing to her for exactly 3 seconds. Then memory clicked into place. Whispers at gallery openings, careful silence when certain collectors entered a room, her supervisor's pale face the one time she'd asked about the DeSantis family's art acquisitions. Yes. He didn't elaborate. Didn't need to. And as of 5 minutes ago, you're mine. Sophia's mouth went dry. Excuse me. Those men saw me claim you in front of half of Milan's art world. By morning, every family in the city will know that Sophia Bellini is under my protection. His eyes glittered in the darkness. Which means you're also under my control. I never agreed to. You got in the car, Bellissima. You made your choice. The city blurred past the tinted windows, familiar streets becoming foreign territory. Sophia's mind raced, trying to find an angle, an escape, anything that didn't involve becoming the property of a man whose reputation was built on violence and empire. How long? She asked, hating the tremor in her voice. How long what? How long do I have to pretend? Luca leaned back against the leather seat, utterly relaxed in a way that somehow made him more dangerous. Until the threat is neutralized. Could be days. Could be weeks. His gaze found hers in the darkness. Could be forever if you're not careful. That night, Sophia found herself in a penthouse that occupied the entire top floor of a building she'd passed 100 times without knowing what it contained. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, Milan spread out below like a glittering promise. But all she could focus on was the man standing at the bar, pouring amber liquid into 2 glasses with the casual grace of someone comfortable with luxury and violence in equal measure. Drink, he said, crossing to hand her one. You're shaking. She was. Sophia wrapped her fingers around the crystal tumbler, letting the weight of it ground her. I don't understand any of this. Why me? Why would anyone want to kill you? Luca settled into the chair across from her, close enough that she could see the intricate tattoos winding up his forearms. Italian script mixed with symbols she didn't recognize. Because you saw something you shouldn't have. Because your supervisor is preparing to testify against the Rossi family. Because in my world, innocent bystanders don't exist. I'm not part of your world. You are now. He took a slow sip of his drink, watching her over the rim. The moment I put my hand on you in that gallery, I made you part of it. Sophia's fingers tightened around the glass. You had no right. I had every right. His voice didn't rise, but something in it made her breath catch. Because the alternative was watching them drag you into an alley and put a bullet in your head. Was that what you wanted, Bellissima? Should I have let them kill you instead? The words hit like a physical blow. Sophia took a large swallow of her drink, gasping as it burned down her throat. No, she whispered. No, thank you. Don't thank me. Luca's eyes were dark, unreadable. This protection comes with a price. What price? You stay here. You don't leave without my permission. You don't contact anyone from your old life until I say it's safe. He paused, letting each word sink in. And when we're in public, you smile at me like you're in love. You touch me like you can't help yourself. You make everyone believe that you're exactly where you want to be. That's non-negotiable. Sophia set down her glass before she threw it at him. So I'm a prisoner. You're protected. Luca rose from his chair with fluid grace, moving to the windows. The city lights cast shadows across his face, highlighting the sharp angles of his jaw, the brutal beauty of his features. There's a difference, Sophia. You'll learn it. Days later, Sophia still hadn't learned the difference. She'd learned other things instead. That Luca left before dawn each morning, returning at unpredictable hours with blood on his knuckles he didn't bother to hide. That the penthouse had 3 bedrooms, but he'd given her the master, taking the smaller room for himself without explanation. That he cooked dinner most nights, moving around the kitchen with the same controlled efficiency he brought to everything else. That she was starting to feel safe, which terrified her more than the original threat ever had. You need to go out, he said one evening, appearing in the doorway of what had become her room. Be seen. Reinforce the narrative. Sophia looked up from the book she'd been pretending to read. Where? Dinner. Il Gabbiano. His gaze traveled over her, assessing. Where something that makes it clear you're not available to anyone but me. Heat crept up her neck. I don't have anything like that. Check your closet. She found it after he left. a dress in deep emerald silk that looked like it cost more than her monthly rent. It fit perfectly, hugging curves she usually tried to downplay, the neckline low enough to be daring without crossing into scandalous. When she emerged from the bedroom, Luca's expression didn't change. But something flickered in his eyes, dark and possessive, before he schooled his features back to careful neutrality. "Perfect," he said softly. "They'll hate me for having you. Isn't that the point?" "Part of it." He offered his arm, the gesture oddly old-fashioned. "The other part is making sure they know what happens to anyone who tries to take what's mine." The restaurant was exactly what Sophia expected. Expensive, exclusive, filled with people who radiated power and danger in equal measure. Heads turned when they entered, conversations stuttering before resuming in lower tones. Luca's hand settled at the small of her back, that same possessive touch from the gallery, and guided her through the room like he was parting the Red Sea. Their table overlooked the city, intimate and strategic in equal measure. Luca held her chair, his fingers brushing her bare shoulder as he pushed it in, a casual touch that sent electricity racing down her spine. "Smile," he murmured close to her ear. "We have an audience." Sophia forced her lips to curve, looking up at him through her lashes. The role was becoming easier to play. Or maybe that was the problem. Across the room, a man watched them with cold calculation. Sophia recognized him from the gallery, not one of the three who'd been hunting her, but someone who'd been standing nearby, observing. Now he raised his glass in a mocking salute before turning away. "Who is he?" Sophia asked quietly. "Marco Vitali. Rossi's second." Luca's hand found hers on the table, his thumb tracing circles on her palm that could have been comfort or claiming. "He's here to see if we're real. What if he decides we're not? Then I kill him before he can report back." Luca said it with the same casual tone he might use to discuss the weather. But that would be messy. Better to convince him. Before Sophia could ask how, he lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that was somehow more intimate than anything they'd shared. His eyes held hers, dark and intense, and for a moment she forgot they were pretending. Forgot the audience, the danger, the careful lie they were constructing. For a moment it felt terrifyingly real. Weeks later the pretending had become second nature. Sophia had learned to lean into Luca's touch, to laugh at his dry observations, to exist in the space between his protection and his possession without questioning which was which. She'd learned that he took his coffee black, that he had nightmares he never discussed, that the tattoos on his arms were names, people he'd lost, people he'd killed, all mixed together in permanent ink. She'd learned that she was falling for a man who might never let her go. "You're quiet tonight," Luca observed, pouring wine at dinner. They were in the penthouse, the city spread beneath them, alone in a way that should have felt safer than the public performances but somehow felt more dangerous. "Thinking," Sophia admitted. "About when this ends." She met his gaze across the table. "When the threat is neutralized and I can go back to my life." Something shifted in his expression, there and gone too quickly to read. "And if I told you the threat would never be fully neutralized, that there will always be someone who remembers what you saw, what you know, then I'd ask what you're really saying." Luca set down his glass with careful precision. "I'm saying that some protections are permanent, Bellissima. Some claims can't be undone." Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs. "You promised." "I promised to keep you safe." He rose from his chair, moving around the table with predatory grace. "I never promised to let you go." She should have been afraid. Should have run, fought, done something other than sit frozen as he cupped her face in his hands, tilting her head back to meet his eyes. "Tell me you don't feel it," he said softly, dangerously. "Tell me the last 3 weeks have been nothing but pretending for you." Sophia couldn't. The words stuck in her throat, truth and lie tangled too tightly to separate. "That's what I thought." His thumb brushed her lower lip, a whisper of contact that made her breath catch. "You're mine, Sophia. Not because of the threat. Not because of the lie we've been selling. Because somewhere between that gallery and tonight you stopped fighting it. You can't just." "I can." His hand slid to her shoulders, grip firm but not painful. "I have. And unless you tell me right now that you want to leave, that you'd rather take your chances with the Rossis than stay here with me, I'm going to stop pretending this is temporary." The choice hung between them, heavy as fate. Sophia knew what she should say, knew that a man like Luca DeSantis was danger wrapped in silk, that his protection came with chains, that loving him would mean stepping into a world she'd never truly escape. She knew all of it. And still, when she opened her mouth, the word that came out was, stay. Something fierce and possessive flared in Luca's eyes. Say it again. I want to stay. The truth tasted like surrender and freedom in equal measure. I want. He kissed her before she could finish, swallowing her words with a hunger that stole her breath. It wasn't gentle. Luca didn't do anything gently, but it was devastatingly thorough, claiming her mouth like he'd already claimed every other part of her. Sophia's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and somewhere in the back of her mind she registered that this was it. The moment the pretend relationship became irrevocably real. The moment she chose him. When Luca finally pulled back, his breathing was ragged, control fraying at the edges. Bedroom, he said roughly. Now. Before I take you right here. Sophia went, and for the first time in weeks she wasn't afraid of what came next. That night blurred into sensation and surrender, Luca's hands mapping every inch of her skin, his voice rough in her ear as he whispered Italian endearments she half understood and completely believed. When it was over, when they lay tangled in sheets that smelled like him, like them, Sophia pressed her face against his chest and tried not to think about all the ways this could end in heartbreak. Don't, Luca murmured, his hand stroking her hair. I can hear you thinking. Can't help it. Then think about this instead. He tilted her chin up, forcing her to meet his eyes in the darkness. I've built an empire on violence and control. I've made choices that would horrify you if you knew the details. But every single person who's ever threatened you, they're already dead, Bellissima. I killed them myself. Sophia's breath caught. What? The men from the gallery. The ones who were sent to eliminate you. His expression was utterly calm, utterly certain. They died the night you got in my car. Rossi's second, the one from the restaurant? He disappeared 3 days ago. Your supervisor, the one who put you in danger. Luca's thumb brushed her cheek with devastating gentleness. He's in protective custody, making a deal with the prosecutor that will destroy the Rossi family. And you, Sophia, are completely, absolutely safe. The words should have terrified her. Instead, they settled over her like a blanket, warm and suffocating and impossible to escape. Why didn't you tell me? Because I needed you here. Needed the world to believe you were mine so thoroughly that no one would ever question it. His hand slid to the back of her neck, possessive and protective. And because somewhere along the way it stopped being about protection and started being about keeping you. Sophia's eyes burned. That's selfish. Manipulative. Everything you should hate me for. Luca's voice dropped to a whisper. But you don't, do you, Bellissima? You can't. He was right. God help her, he was right. What happens now? She asked instead. Now. His lips curved in a smile that was equal parts promise and threat. Now we stop pretending this was ever going to end. Months later, Sophia had learned to navigate Luca's world with the same careful grace she'd once used to handle priceless art. She'd learned which families to acknowledge, which events required her presence at his side, which silences meant danger and which meant he was simply thinking. She'd learned that loving him meant accepting the violence that came with his name, the power that shaped every interaction, the reality that she'd never be free of either. She'd learned that she didn't want to be. You're staring, she said without looking up from the book she was cataloging. Luca had bought her a private collection to appraise, giving her work that wouldn't put her in danger while satisfying her need for professional purpose. I'm admiring. He moved behind her chair, his hands settling on her shoulders. There's a difference. Semantics. Important ones. His lips brushed her temple, a casual intimacy that still sent heat through her veins. We have an event tonight. The Castellano wedding. Sophia tensed. I thought we were avoiding the Castellanos. We were. Now we're making a statement. His hands tightened fractionally. They've been questioning my commitment to you, suggesting that our relationship is still just strategy. And you want to prove otherwise. I want them to understand that you're not negotiable, Sophia. Not for alliances, not for territory, not for anything they could offer me. Luca turned her chair, forcing her to meet his eyes. I want them to see exactly how far I'd go to keep you. The wedding was spectacular. Old money and older traditions, held in a palazzo that had witnessed centuries of deals and deaths. Sofia wore midnight blue, diamonds at her throat that Luca had fastened himself, his fingers lingering on her skin in a way that made his intentions clear. When they entered the reception, silence rippled outward like a stone dropped in still water. Luca's hand settled at her waist, possessive and proud. "Smile, Bellissima. Show them what I've won." Sofia had learned to play her role perfectly. She leaned into him, let her hand rest on his chest, looked up at him with genuine affection she no longer bothered to hide. Around them, whispers started and stopped, glances sliding away when Luca's gaze swept the room. "Don Luca." An older man approached, expensive suit and calculating eyes. "So good of you to attend." "Castellano." Luca's voice was pleasant, empty. "Congratulations on your son's marriage." "Thank you." The man's gaze shifted to Sofia, lingering just a fraction too long. "And you've brought your lovely companion. We haven't been formally introduced." "Sofia Bellini," Luca said before she could speak. "My fiancé." The word landed like a bomb. Sofia's breath caught, but she didn't falter. Didn't question. Just leaned into Luca's side and let him claim her in front of everyone who'd ever doubted the depth of his commitment. "Fiancé," Castellano repeated slowly. "I wasn't aware congratulations were in order." "They are now." Luca's smile was all teeth. "We were keeping it private. But I've decided privacy is overrated when it comes to making my intentions clear." Later in the car, Sofia finally let herself react. "Fiancé." Did I stutter? Luca didn't look away from the window, but she could see the tension in his jaw. "You could have asked me first." "Could have." Now he turned, his eyes burning with an intensity that stole her breath. "But we both know what your answer would have been." "Do we?" "Yes." He reached across the space between them, cupping her face with a gentleness that contradicted every rumor about his nature. "Because you love me, Bellissima. You've loved me since before you were ready to admit it. Just like I've loved you since the moment I put my hand on your back and decided you were mine to keep." Sofia's eyes burned. "That's not." "It is." His thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. "I know what I am, Sofia. I know I took your choice, your freedom, your chance at a normal life. But I'd do it again. 1,000 times. Because losing you isn't an option I'm willing to consider." "What if I said no?" she whispered. "What if I wanted to leave?" Luca's expression didn't change. "Then I'd let you go. Because keeping you against your will would destroy the only thing I've ever wanted to protect. Your happiness." He paused, his gaze searching hers. "But you won't say no. Will you, Bellissima?" He was right. God, he was always right. "No," Sofia breathed. "I won't say no." The kiss that followed was possession and promise, claim and surrender. When they finally broke apart, Luca rested his forehead against hers, his breathing unsteady. "I'll have a ring by morning," he said roughly. "Something worthy of you." "I don't need." "I do." His hand found hers, threading their fingers together. "I need everyone to see it. Need them to know that touching you means war." Sofia should have been disturbed by the possessiveness in his voice. Instead she felt cherished, protected, claimed in ways that went beyond strategy or safety. That night, lying in bed with Luca's arm heavy around her waist, Sofia finally accepted the truth she'd been avoiding for months. She was in love with a monster. With a man who killed without hesitation, who controlled an empire built on violence, who'd stolen her freedom in the name of protection. And she wouldn't change a single thing. Days later, the ring appeared, an emerald the color of the dress she'd worn to Il Gabbiano, surrounded by diamonds that caught light like captured stars. Luca slipped it on her finger over breakfast, casual as a morning kiss, and Sofia felt the weight of it settle against her skin like a brand. "Perfect," he murmured, lifting her hand to examine his choice. "Now everyone will know." They did. By evening, the engagement was the talk of Milan's underworld. Don Luca de Santis, who'd never shown interest in marriage, who'd built his reputation on cold strategy and colder violence, completely undone by a civilian art curator with no connections and no power. The rumors were vicious. That Sofia had trapped him. That she was a spy. That the engagement would never make it to a wedding because Luca's enemies would eliminate her first. What the rumors didn't account for was the man himself. "I want you to learn to shoot," Luca said one evening, setting a sleek handgun on the table between them. Sophia stared at it. Why? Because I can protect you from external threats, Bellissima. But I need you to be able to protect yourself if I'm not there. His expression was utterly serious. I need to know you can survive anything. He learned. Spent hours at a private range, Luca's body pressed against her back as he corrected her stance, his hands guiding hers, his voice low in her ear. The lessons were practical and intimate in equal measure, another way for him to bind her to his world while giving her the tools to navigate it. Better, he said after she'd put 5 rounds in the center of the target. But you're still thinking too much. Don't aim, feel where the shot needs to go. That doesn't make sense. It will. His lips brushed her ear, a whisper of contact that made her shiver. Trust your instincts, Sophia. They've kept you alive this long. Weeks later, those instincts saved her life. She was alone in the penthouse, cataloging a new acquisition when she felt it. That same prickling awareness from the gallery, the sense of being watched by hostile eyes. Sophia's hand moved to the gun Luca had insisted she keep within reach, fingers closing around familiar metal. The door to the study opened silently. A man stood in the doorway, someone she didn't recognize, but the gun in his hand was message enough. Sophia Bellini, he said calmly. You're harder to reach than I expected. Who are you? Someone who's been paid very well to fix Luca DeSantis's mistake. The gun lifted, aimed at her center mass. Nothing personal. Sophia didn't think. Didn't aim. Just felt where the shot needed to go and pulled the trigger. The man dropped with a look of surprise, blood blooming across his chest. Sophia stood frozen, the gun trembling in her hands, trying to process what she'd just done. What she'd had to do. Sophia. Luca's voice cut through the ringing in her ears, and then he was there, pulling the gun from her grip, his hands framing her face. Bellissima, look at me. Focus. She did, finding his eyes in the chaos, anchoring herself in the dark certainty she found there. Did he touch you? Luca's voice was deadly calm. No. He came through the door and I. Good. He pulled her against his chest, one hand cradling the back of her head. So fucking good, Bellissima. You did exactly what you needed to do. Men appeared, Luca's men, Sophia realized distantly, removing the body with efficient silence. Luca never let her go, holding her through the aftermath, his heartbeat steady against her ear while hers raced like a trapped bird. Who sent him? She asked when she could finally speak. Someone who wanted to send me a message. Luca's arms tightened. Someone who's going to learn that there are fates worse than death. That night Luca didn't leave her side. Didn't go hunting for whoever had sent an assassin into their home. Just held her, his hands gentle, his voice a low rumble as he talked her through the shock and fear. I killed someone, Sophia whispered in the darkness. You survived. Luca's lips brushed her forehead. There's a difference, Bellissima. One I need you to understand. How do you live with it? Knowing you've. Because every person I've killed was a choice between their life and someone I loved. His hand stroked her hair, soothing and possessive. And I'll always choose you, Sophia. Every single time. The confession should have horrified her. Instead, it settled something deep in her chest, an understanding that in Luca's world, love wasn't soft or safe. It was fierce and brutal and willing to destroy anything that threatened it. She could live with that. Had already learned to love it. Months later, the wedding date was set. A private ceremony, just family and closest allies, in the same church where 3 generations of DeSantis men had married. Sophia wore ivory lace, her dark hair swept up to reveal the diamond necklace Luca had given her, the emerald ring catching light with every movement. Nervous? Her reflection asked, and Sophia realized Luca had appeared in the doorway, devastating in a black suit that emphasized his lethal grace. You're not supposed to see me before the ceremony. I've never been good at following rules. He crossed to stand behind her, his hands settling on her shoulders. Besides, I needed to give you this. He fastened something around her wrist, a delicate bracelet, platinum links interspersed with tiny emeralds. But it was the inscription on the inside that made her breath catch. Mia per semper. Mine forever. Luca. I need you to understand something before we do this. His eyes met hers in the mirror, dark and intense. Once we say those vows, there's no going back. You'll be bound to me in ways that go beyond legality or tradition. You'll be mine, Sophia, in every way that matters. I already am. I know. His hand slid to her throat, possessive and gentle. But I need you to choose it. Freely. Without the threat, without the protection. Just you and me and the truth of what we've become. Sophia turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd stolen her freedom and given her everything she hadn't known she wanted. The man who'd killed for her, lied for her, would burn down his empire to keep her safe. The man she loved with a fierceness that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. I choose you, she said clearly. I choose this. All of it. Luca's kiss was answer and claim, sealing the promise between them. When he finally pulled back, his eyes were burning with an emotion that looked almost like relief. Then let's go make it official, Bellissima. The ceremony was beautiful. Old traditions and older promises, words spoken in Italian that bound them together in ways Sophia was only beginning to understand. When Luca slipped the wedding band onto her finger, his hand was steady, his voice unwavering as he vowed to love, protect and cherish her for the rest of their lives. When it was her turn, Sophia's voice broke on the words. But she meant every one of them. At the reception, held in the gardens of the De Santis estate, Sophia watched Luca command the room with the same effortless authority he brought to everything. But now, when he looked at her across the crowd, his expression softened. Now, when he pulled her onto the dance floor, his touch was tender beneath the possession. Happy, he murmured against her ear. Dangerously so. His laugh was low, intimate. Good. Because I plan to make you even happier. Is that a threat or a promise? Both. Luca's hand splayed across the small of her back, pulling her closer. Always both, Bellissima. Later, in the private wing of the estate that would now be their home, Luca undressed her with reverent hands, mapping every inch of skin he'd claimed as his own. And when he finally made love to her as his wife, it was with a tenderness that stole her breath and a possession that marked her soul. This was love in Luca's world, fierce and brutal and beautiful, dangerous and safe in equal measure. And Sophia had never been more certain of anything in her life. But peace, she was learning, was temporary in the world of men like Luca de Santis. 3 months into their marriage, the first real threat emerged, not to Sophia's life but to the empire Luca had built. A rival family, emboldened by rumors that marriage had made him soft, began moving into his territory, challenging his authority in ways that couldn't be ignored. Sophia watched him change, saw the coldness return to his eyes, the violence coiled beneath his skin. Watched him prepare for war while trying to shield her from the worst of it. Talk to me, she demanded one night, finding him in his study at 3 a.m, surrounded by maps and manifests. Go back to bed, Bellissima. Not until you tell me what's happening. Luca's jaw tightened. The Morettas are making a play for the Port Authority. If they succeed, it will cut off half our revenue streams. So stop them. It's not that simple. He finally looked at her, and the exhaustion in his eyes made her chest ache. They've allied with the Castellanos. Together, they're strong enough to challenge us directly. What do they want? Me to step down. Retire. His laugh was bitter. Or you. Sophia's blood turned to ice. What? Castellano thinks if he can't have you, no one should. Luca rose from his chair, crossing to cup her face with hands that trembled slightly. He's offered an alliance if I give you up. Territory, peace, everything I've fought for, all of it in exchange for you. The room spun. And I told him to go to hell. His thumb brushed her cheekbone, achingly gentle. I told him that I'd burn every bridge, destroy every alliance, lose every territory I've ever claimed before I'd let him or anyone else touch you. Luca. I mean it, Sophia. His eyes burned with terrible certainty. You're not negotiable. You never were. But Sophia heard what he wasn't saying, that choosing her meant losing everything else. That his love for her would cost him the empire he'd built, the power he'd claimed, possibly his life. There has to be another way, she whispered. There isn't. Luca pulled her into his arms, holding her like she might disappear. And I don't care. Because a world where I have everything but you isn't a world worth living in. The words should have been romantic. Instead, they felt like a death sentence. Days later, Sophia stood at the window of their bedroom, watching the sun rise over a city that suddenly felt hostile. Behind her, the bed was empty. Luca had left before dawn again, preparing for a war she'd inadvertently started just by existing. The guilt was suffocating. Stop thinking so loud. Luca's voice came from the doorway. I can hear it from downstairs. Sophia didn't turn. How much will you lose? If you choose me over the alliance. Does it matter? Yes. Now she faced him, this man who'd become her entire world. It matters to me. Luca crossed to her with measured steps, still dressed for business. Black suit, crisp shirt, the tattoos on his forearms visible where he'd rolled up his sleeves. The ports. The shipping lanes. 3 territories I've held for 5 years. His hands settled on her waist. Approximately 40% of my annual revenue. Half my allied families will turn neutral, waiting to see which way the wind blows. The numbers were staggering. Luca. And I don't care about any of it, Bellissima. His forehead rested against hers. Because I've spent 10 years building power and it took me 10 minutes with you to realize that power without purpose is just another prison. That's not. It is. His kiss was fierce, desperate. You're my purpose, Sophia. Everything else is just details. But details, Sophia was learning, could kill you just as dead as bullets. That afternoon she did something she'd never done before. Went into Luca's office uninvited, accessed his private files, learned the full scope of what her presence in his life was costing. The numbers were worse than he'd admitted. The threat more immediate. Within weeks, possibly days, the Morettas and Castellanos would move. And Luca, choosing love over empire, would be crushed between them. Unless she did something about it. Sophia found Marco Vitali's contact information buried in Luca's encrypted files. The same man who'd watched them at Il Gabbiano, who'd been testing their relationship from the beginning. According to the notes, he was Rossi's former second. But Rossi was dead now, his family scattered, and Marco was freelance. Available to the highest bidder. Or to someone desperate enough to make a deal. She sent the message before she could talk herself out of it. I need to meet. Alone. Name the place. The response came within minutes. The gallery where it started. 2 hours. Come alone or don't come at all. Sophia dressed carefully. Nothing that screamed wealth or DeSantis protection. Just simple black and the determination to save the man she loved from his own devotion. She left a note for Luca, vague enough to buy time, specific enough that he wouldn't panic immediately. The gallery was exactly as she remembered. Art and elegance and the ghost of the moment her life had changed forever. Marco Vitali stood before the same painting she'd been admiring when Luca first touched her, his posture relaxed but alert. Sophia DeSantis, he said without turning. I wondered if you'd be brave enough. I'm here. So you are. Now he faced her and his expression was calculating. Does your husband know you're playing spy? This has nothing to do with Luca. Everything you do has to do with Luca. That's the problem. Marco circled her slowly, assessing. You're the weakness everyone's been waiting for. The crack in Don DeSantis's armor. Sophia lifted her chin. Then make me the solution instead. That got his attention. Explain. The Morettas and Castellanos want Luca broken. They think taking me away from him will accomplish that. She forced her voice steady. What if they're wrong? What if losing his empire breaks him instead? You want me to convince them to take the alliance? I want you to convince them that I'm not worth what they'll lose if they go to war. Sophia's hands clenched at her sides. That a woman, even me, isn't worth destroying the balance of power in Milan. Marco studied her for a long moment. And what do you get out of this? Luca keeps his empire. Stays safe. Stays powerful enough that no one ever threatens him again. While you disappear. The word tasted like ash. Quietly. Completely. In a way that looks like I chose to leave. He'll never believe that. He will if you sell it right. Sophia's throat burned. Tell them I was a spy all along. That I seduced him for information, got what I needed and vanished. Make me the villain. Make him the victim. Let him rebuild with his reputation intact. Marco's laugh was sharp. You're asking me to destroy your marriage to save your husband's empire. I'm asking you to save his life. Her voice cracked. Because if this war happens, he'll fight it for me. And he'll die for me. And I won't let that happen. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications. Finally, Marco nodded slowly. I'll need something from you. Proof that you're serious. Anything. Information. Real intelligence from Luca's files. Enough to make my story believable. His eyes were cold. Enough that when I tell them you were using him they'll buy it completely. Sophia's stomach turned. But she nodded. I'll get it. You have 24 hours. After that, the Morettas make their move and your sacrifice won't matter. She left the gallery with her heart in pieces, Marco's deadline echoing in her mind. 24 hours to betray everything Luca had trusted her with. 24 hours to become the villain in their story so he could survive it. 24 hours to break her own heart to save his life. That night, Luca came home to find her curled in his favorite chair, the one that smelled like him, trying to memorize everything about this life before she destroyed it. Bellissima. He knelt in front of her, concern etched across his features. What's wrong? Everything. Nothing. The truth she couldn't tell him. Just tired, she lied and hated herself for how easily it came. Luca's thumb brushed away a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. Talk to me, Sophia. Please. I love you. The words were desperate, final. I need you to know that. No matter what happens, I love you. Something shifted in his expression. Suspicion, fear, and understanding that came too close to the truth. What did you do? Nothing yet. She cupped his face, memorizing the sharp angles, the dark eyes, the mouth that had claimed hers 1,000 times. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. If I ever leave, if something happens and I'm not here anymore, I need you to let me go. Her voice broke. I need you to move on, rebuild, be the man you were before I complicated everything. No. Luca's hands tightened on her. Whatever you're planning, the answer is no. Luca. I mean it, Sophia. He pulled her from the chair, holding her against his chest with desperate strength. I know that look. I know what you're thinking. And I'm telling you right now, there is no scenario where I let you sacrifice yourself for me. Even if it saves your life? Especially then. His hand fisted in her hair, tilting her head back to force eye contact. Because a life without you isn't worth saving. Do you understand? You're not negotiable. Not for peace, not for power, not for anything. Sophia closed her eyes against the tears. You can't mean that. I've never meant anything more. Luca's kiss was bruising, claiming, desperate. We survive this together or not at all. That's the only option I'm willing to consider. But Sophia had already made her choice. And as Luca carried her to bed, as he made love to her with a tenderness edged in desperation, she memorized every touch, every whispered endearment, every moment of the life she was about to destroy. Because 24 hours was already counting down. And she'd never been very good at breaking promises. Hours later, while Luca slept, Sophia accessed his private files with the codes she'd watched him enter 100 times. Her hands shook as she copied intelligence that would damn her. Shipment schedules, allied family contacts, security protocols. Everything Marco needed to make her betrayal believable. Everything that would break Luca's heart and save his life. She was encrypting the files when she felt him behind her. Sophia. Luca's voice was deadly calm. Step away from the computer. He couldn't. I'm sorry. For what? He moved closer and she could feel the violence coiled beneath his control. For sneaking into my office? For stealing classified information? Or for thinking I wouldn't notice? For loving you too much to watch you die for me? The words hung between them, confession and condemnation. Luca's hand shot out, closing the laptop with controlled force. Explain. Now. So she did. Told him about Marco, about the meeting, about the deal she'd made to paint herself as a traitor so he could keep his empire. Told him everything except the part where she'd planned to disappear before he could stop her. Luca listened in terrible silence, his expression carved from stone. When she finally finished, he turned away, hands braced against the desk, shoulders rigid with fury. You were going to leave me. Not a question. A statement of fact that cut like a blade. To save you. To destroy me. He whirled back and the pain in his eyes was worse than any anger. Did you really think I'd survive losing you? That I'd just rebuild my empire and forget the woman who became my entire world? You would have moved on eventually. No. The word was absolute. I wouldn't have. I would have torn this city apart looking for you. And when I found out what you'd done, what you'd sacrificed. His voice broke. It would have killed me, Sophia. Slower than a bullet, but just as final. The truth of it hit her like a physical blow. In trying to save him, she would have destroyed him anyway. Just in a different, more agonizing way. I didn't know what else to do, she whispered. You trust me. Luca crossed to her, pulling her roughly into his arms. You trust that I'll find a way to protect both you and what we've built. You trust that I'm smart enough, ruthless enough, to outmaneuver anyone who threatens us. But the cost is mine to pay. His hand cupped the back of her head, holding her against his chest. And I'm paying it gladly, Bellissima. Because you're not a weakness. You're the reason I'm still fighting. Sophia clung to him, tears soaking into his shirt. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know. His lips brushed her temple. But we're doing this my way now. Together. No more secrets, no more sacrifices. Agreed. She nodded against his chest, relief and shame warring in her throat. Good. Luca's voice hardened. Now let's deal with Marco Vitali. Days later, Marco received a message from Sophia. Intelligence as promised, delivered right on schedule. What he didn't know was that every file had been carefully curated by Luca himself. A mixture of real information and strategic deception designed to look authentic while revealing nothing of actual value. What he also didn't know was that Luca had been tracking Sophia's phone since the moment she'd sent the first message. Had known about the meeting, the deal, the betrayal she'd planned. Had been waiting to see how far she'd go before he intervened. You let me think I was fooling you, Sophia said, watching Luca prepare for the meeting he'd arranged with the Morettas and Castellanos. You knew what I was planning the whole time. I knew you'd try to sacrifice yourself. Luca adjusted his cufflinks with practiced ease. I didn't know the specifics. But I trusted you'd come to me before you did something irreversible. And if I hadn't? His eyes met hers in the mirror. Then I would have stopped you. One way or another. The certainty in his voice should have annoyed her. Instead it felt like safety. What's your plan? Sophia asked. To give them exactly what they want. Luca turned, devastating in black. Every inch the dangerous man she'd fallen in love with. Just not the way they expect. The meeting was held in neutral territory. A warehouse on the edge of the city, emptied of everything except a single table and enough tension to choke on. Moretti and Castellano sat on one side, flanked by their soldiers. Luca sat across from them, utterly alone, utterly calm. Sophia watched from the shadows, the gun Luca had taught her to use heavy in her purse. Don DeSantis, Moretti began, his smile oily. So good of you to accept our invitation. Let's skip the pleasantries. Luca's voice cut through the false civility. You want my territory and my wife. I'm here to negotiate. Castellano leaned forward. We're listening. The territory is yours. The shipping lanes, the port authority, everything I've held for the past 5 years. Luca's expression didn't change. In exchange, you leave Sophia alone. Completely. Forever. Sophia's heart stopped. He was doing it. Actually giving up his empire for her. And what do you get out of this arrangement? Moretti asked suspiciously. My wife. Alive and safe. Luca's hands rested calmly on the table. Which is all I've ever wanted. You'd really walk away from everything you've built for a woman? I already told you she's not negotiable. His smile was dangerous. I meant it. Castellano and Moretti exchanged glances, greed and calculation warring in their expressions. They'd expected a fight, a war, blood in the streets. Not this quiet surrender. There's a catch, Castellano said slowly. There has to be. Only one. Luca's voice dropped to something lethal. You take the territory, you honor the peace, and you never speak her name again. Because if I hear that either of you, or anyone in your organizations, has so much as looked at Sophia wrong, I'll burn your families to the ground. Fully. Starting with everyone you love. The temperature in the room plummeted. You just said you're giving up your power, Moretti protested. I'm giving up my territory. Not my skills. Not my contacts. Not my willingness to do whatever it takes to protect what's mine. Luca's smile was all teeth. And I promise you, gentlemen, that a man with nothing to lose except the woman he loves is far more dangerous than one protecting an empire. The threat hung in the air, terrible and absolute. Sophia saw the moment they believed him. Saw the calculation shift, the understanding that accepting this deal meant looking over their shoulders for the rest of their lives. We'll need time to consider, Castellano started. You have 5 seconds. Lucas stood, buttoning his jacket with casual grace. Accept my terms or I walk out of here and we go to war. And when the dust settles, I promise you won't like what's left standing. That's 1. Moretti's hand twitched toward his gun. 2. Castellano's face went red with fury. 3. Sophia's hand closed around her own weapon, ready to fight beside him if this went wrong. 4. Wait. Moretti raised a hand, shooting Castellano a warning look. We accept the territory for your wife's safety. You have our word. Your word means nothing to me. Luca pulled a contract from his jacket, sliding it across the table. But this does. Sign it. Both of you. Because if you break this agreement, I'll use it to turn every family in Italy against you. They signed. Hands shaking with rage, but they signed. When it was done, Luca collected the contract, nodded once and turned to leave. He paused in the doorway, his voice carrying across the warehouse. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure destroying you. Then he was gone and Sophia was running after him, her heart in her throat. She found him outside, leaning against his car, his carefully controlled facade finally cracking. When he saw her, something fierce and possessive flared in his eyes. You gave up everything, Sophia breathed. I kept everything that matters. Luca pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. The rest is just business, Bellissima. We'll rebuild. How? Together. His laugh was rough. I started with nothing once before. I can do it again. As long as I have you. Sophia pulled back far enough to see his face. You're insane. Probably. His thumb brushed her cheek. But I'm yours. And that's all I need to be. The kiss that followed was desperate and relieved, claim and surrender. When they finally broke apart, Sophia rested her forehead against his chest, listening to his heartbeat slow to normal. What now? She asked. Now. Luca's hand stroked her hair, gentle and possessive. Now we disappear for a while. Let them enjoy their victory. And when we come back, his smile was dangerous. We'll remind them exactly who I am when I'm fighting for something worth keeping. Months later, Sophia stood in a villa overlooking the Amalfi coast, watching the sun set over water that looked like liquid gold. Behind her, Luca was on the phone, speaking in rapid Italian, rebuilding his network one careful conversation at a time. They'd left Milan the night of the meeting, disappeared into the kind of anonymity that only vast wealth could buy. For weeks, they'd existed in a bubble, just the two of them learning each other without the weight of empires and enemies pressing down. It should have been peaceful. Instead, Sophia watched Luca work and realized that he was building something new. Something more dangerous than what he'd given up. You're plotting, she observed when he finally ended the call. Strategizing. Luca crossed to wrap his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. There's a difference. Not much of one. His laugh rumbled against her back. The Morettis are overextended. They took too much territory too fast and they don't have the infrastructure to maintain it. Within 6 months, they'll be vulnerable. And you'll be there to take advantage. I'll be there to take back what's mine. His lips brushed her neck. With interest. Sophia turned in his arms, studying the man she'd married. You planned this. All of it. Letting them think they'd won. I planned to keep you safe. Luca's expression sobered. Everything else is just bonus. You're a dangerous man, Luca DeSantis. Only to people who threaten what I love. His hand cupped her face, achingly gentle. To you, I'm whatever you need me to be. That night, they made love with the windows open, the sound of waves crashing against rocks mixing with whispered promises and breathless endearments. And when it was over, when they lay tangled in sheets that smelled like salt and sex, Luca pulled her against his chest and spoke the truth they'd both been avoiding. I'm not done, Sophia. With the empire, with the power, with any of it. I know. And I need to know if you can live with that. With me being who I am, doing what I do. His hand stroked her hair, but she could feel the tension in his body. Because I'll walk away if you ask me to. I'll be whoever you need me to be. But I need you to be sure. Sophia was quiet for a long moment, thinking about the man he was versus the man he pretended to be. The violence and the gentleness. The control and the devotion. I don't want you to walk away, she said finally. I want you to be exactly who you are. Because that's the man I fell in love with. Luca's arms tightened around her. Even knowing what it means. The danger, the choices, the things I'll have to do. Especially knowing that. Sophia lifted her head to meet his eyes. Because you're not dangerous in spite of loving me, Luca. You're dangerous because of it. And I'm selfish enough to want that protection, that devotion, that absolute certainty that you'll burn down the world to keep me safe. His kiss was answer and promise, claiming her mouth with a hunger that spoke of relief and possession in equal measure. Then let's go home, Bellissima, he murmured against her lips. Let's remind Milan exactly who we are. 6 months later they returned to a city that had changed in their absence. Moretti was dead, killed by his own men after a shipment went missing and accusations of embezzlement surfaced. Castellano was barely holding on to power, hemorrhaging allies and territory as younger, hungrier families moved in. And Luca de Santis, presumed weakened by love and loss, returned like a ghost from a nightmare. "Welcome home, Don de Santis," Marco Vitali said, appearing at the private airport where their plane had landed. "Your timing is impeccable as always." "Marco." Luca's hand settled possessively at Sophia's waist. "I wasn't expecting a welcoming committee. Consider it a professional courtesy." Marco's gaze flicked to Sophia, acknowledgement and respect in equal measure. "Mrs. de Santis. I owe you an apology." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "For what?" "For underestimating your husband's capacity for long-term planning." His smile was wry. "That intelligence you provided? It was perfect. Just real enough to be believed, just false enough to cause chaos when the Morettas tried to act on it." "It was a joint effort," Luca said smoothly. "Sophia has many talents." "Clearly." Marco handed over a folder. "Your empire, Don de Santis. Or what's left of it. Turns out people prefer a calculating strategist to impulsive amateurs." "Who you?" Luca flipped through the documents, his expression carefully neutral. But Sophia saw the satisfaction in his eyes, the predatory pleasure of a plan executed perfectly. "The Port Authority?" he asked. "Waiting for you to reclaim it. Along with the shipping lanes and approximately 70% of the territory you gave up." Marco's tone was dry. "The Castellanos are willing to negotiate a peace treaty. On your terms, naturally." "Naturally." Luca closed the folder, his smile dangerous. "Tell Castellano I'll consider his offer. After he publicly apologizes for threatening my wife. I'll pass along the message." Marco nodded respectfully. "It's good to have you back, Don de Santis. Milan has been boring without you." When he left, Sophia turned to her husband with raised eyebrows. "You planned this? All of it? From the beginning?" "I plan to keep you safe and reclaim what's mine." Luca pulled her close, his voice dropping to that intimate rumble she loved. "The fact that I got to do both? That's just good fortune. You're impossible. I'm yours." His kiss was possessive, claiming. "Which means I'll be impossible, devious and occasionally terrifying. Can you live with that?" Sophia thought about the past 6 months. The peace and the planning, the quiet moments and the sharp edges. Thought about the man who'd given up everything for her and then taken it all back through sheer force of will. Thought about loving him despite and because of everything he was. "I can live with it," she said. "As long as you can live with me calling you out when you're being too devious." Luca's laugh was rich and genuine. "Deal, Bellissima. Now let's go home. I have a city to reclaim and a wife to thoroughly celebrate with." That night, in the penthouse that had become theirs again, Sophia watched Luca move through rooms that had been empty for months with the confidence of a king reclaiming his throne. He made calls, sent messages, began the delicate work of rebuilding relationships and reminding people exactly who he was. And through it all, his gaze kept finding her. Proud. Utterly devoted. "Come here," he commanded, setting aside his phone. Sophia went, settling into his lap with the ease of long practice. His arms came around her, holding her against his chest. "I love you," he said quietly. "More than power, more than empire, more than anything I've ever built or claimed." "I know." She cupped his face, her thumb brushing the sharp line of his jaw. "You proved it when you walked away. And I'll prove it again, every day for the rest of our lives." His kiss was gentle, reverent. "You're my purpose, Sophia. My reason for building something worth protecting. Never forget that." "I won't." She kissed him back, pouring everything she felt into the contact. Now let's finish reclaiming your empire so we can get back to the celebrating part. Luca's laugh was dark and promising. As my wife commands. Weeks later, the final piece fell into place. Castellano appeared at their door, not to threaten but to negotiate. He was thinner, older-looking, the cost of his power play evident in every line of his face. Don DeSantis, he said formally. Mrs. DeSantis. Thank you for seeing me. You have 5 minutes, Luca said coldly, not inviting him past the threshold. Use them wisely. I came to apologize. Castellano's gaze found Sophia, and the regret in his eyes looked genuine. For threatening you, Mrs. DeSantis. For using you as leverage against your husband. It was dishonorable and I'm sorry. Sophia felt Luca tense beside her, ready to strike if this was some kind of trick. She placed a hand on his arm, stilling him. Apology accepted, she said quietly. On one condition. Castellano waited. You tell everyone. Every family, every ally, every enemy. You tell them what happens when someone threatens a DeSantis. Her voice hardened. You tell them exactly how thoroughly my husband destroyed you for even suggesting I could be taken from him. Respect flickered in Castellano's eyes. I will. You have my word. Then we're done here. Luca's hand settled at Sophia's waist, possessive and protective. You can leave now. When the door closed behind him, Sophia turned to find Luca watching her with an expression somewhere between pride and desire. That was necessary. She lifted her chin. I'm not just your wife, Luca. I'm a DeSantis. And it's time people understood what that means. His kiss was fierce and claiming, backing her against the wall with controlled urgency. You're magnificent, he breathed against her lips. Absolutely fucking magnificent. I learned from the best. That night they celebrated in the way only they could, with whispered promises and fierce claiming, with the certainty that they'd survived everything thrown at them and come out stronger. With love that was dangerous and devoted in equal measure. Months turned into years. Luca rebuilt his empire, stronger and more ruthless than before, with Sophia at his side, not as decoration but as partner. She learned the business, the strategies, the careful balance of power and violence that kept them safe. She learned to navigate his world not as a victim or a weakness, but as a force in her own right. The Shanghai deal went through, Luca announced one evening, wrapping his arms around her from behind as she reviewed manifests at his desk. We're officially international again. Congratulations. Sophia leaned back against his chest, allowing herself a moment of pride. You did it. Rebuilt everything you lost. We did it. His lips brushed her temple. None of this works without you, Bellissima. You know that, right? She did. Had learned it through 1,000 small moments. The meetings where her presence settled negotiations, the enemies who backed down because threatening her meant facing Luca's wrath, the allies who respected her counsel as much as his force. I know, she said softly. Just like you know that I'd burn it all down again if it meant keeping you safe. Luca turned her in his arms, his expression intense. We're not burning anything down. Not anymore. We're keeping it all, the empire, the power, each other. Everything. Promise. I've never broken a promise to you. His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. I'm not starting now. That night, wrapped in silk sheets in Luca's arms, Sophia thought about the journey that had brought them here. From a gallery where danger had whispered her name, to a penthouse where love had claimed her soul, to an empire they'd built together from sacrifice and strategy. It wasn't the life she'd imagined. It was dangerous and complicated and sometimes terrifying. It was perfect. I love you, she whispered into the darkness. I know, Bellissima. Luca's arms tightened around her, protective and possessive. You prove it every day by staying. By choosing this life, this world, me. It's not a hard choice. It should be. His voice roughened. Everything I am, everything I've done, you should have run the moment you learned the truth. But I didn't. Sophia turned to face him, finding his eyes in the darkness. Because the truth is, Luca DeSantis, that you're the best man I've ever known. Not despite the violence and the control, but because you used them to protect instead of destroy. Because you chose love over power when it mattered most. Because you're mine. His kiss was answer and promise, sealing them together with the certainty of vows they'd spoken and devotion they'd proven. When he finally pulled back, his forehead rested against hers, their breathing synchronized. "Forever," he said simply. "Forever," Sophia agreed. And in the city below, in the empire they'd built and the world they'd claimed, everyone knew the truth that had started as a lie whispered in a gallery. Sophia Bellini belonged to Luca de Santis, and he would burn the world to keep her. Years later, their story was still told in whispers. The civilian curator who'd captured a mafia boss's heart, the dangerous man who'd given up everything for love, the couple who'd rebuilt an empire on devotion and strategy. But Sophia knew the real story. Knew that love in Luca's world wasn't soft or simple. It was fierce and brutal and absolute. It was choosing each other every single day through violence and peace, through threats and triumphs. It was worth every sacrifice they'd made. "What are you thinking about?" Luca asked, appearing in the doorway of their home office with 2 glasses of wine. "How my life changed in 5 minutes." Sophia accepted the glass, letting him pull her to her feet. "From the moment you whispered that I was in danger and told me to pretend you were mine. Best 5 minutes of my life." His smile was genuine, the dangerous edges softened by years of devotion. Even if it started as a lie. It was never really a lie, was it? Sophia studied the man she'd married, the man who'd become her world. "You claimed me in that gallery, Luca. Made me yours before I even knew your name. Guilty." He pulled her close, swaying gently to music only they could hear. "I took one look at you and knew, this is the woman who'll either save me or destroy me. Possibly both. And you did both. Destroyed the man I was, saved the man I could become." His hand settled at the small of her back, that same possessive touch from the beginning. "Made me believe that love could be stronger than power. It is stronger." Sophia lifted her hand to his cheek, feeling the familiar rasp of stubble, the warmth of skin. "We proved it. We did." Luca's kiss was gentle, reverent, full of promises kept and futures claimed. "And I'll keep proving it, Bellissima. Every single day for the rest of our lives." As the sun set over Milan, painting their empire in gold, Sophia Bellini de Santis stood in the arms of the most dangerous man in Italy and knew, with absolute certainty, that she was exactly where she belonged. In danger. In love. In the arms of the man who'd whispered a warning and changed her life forever. The man who'd pretended to be hers, and then made it real. The end. 5 years after that whispered warning in a gallery, Sophia de Santis stood before a new exhibition, this one featuring her own curated collection. The art world had welcomed her back, though now she came with a different kind of power. Luca stood beside her, his hand at the small of her back, that same possessive touch that had started everything. A young woman passed by, wide-eyed and nervous, clutching her catalog like a lifeline. Sophia caught her eye and smiled, remembering the girl she'd been, innocent, unprotected, unaware of the danger that had been circling. "Stay alert," Sophia said quietly as the woman passed. "You never know when your life might change in 5 minutes." The woman nodded, confused, and moved on. Luca's low laugh rumbled against Sophia's ear. "Giving warnings now, Bellissima? Someone should." She leaned into him, letting the weight of his protection settle around her like a second skin. "After all, danger has a way of finding the unsuspecting." "Or," Luca murmured, his lips brushing her temple, "sometimes the most dangerous thing is the man who claims to be your salvation." Sophia turned in his arms, finding his dark eyes filled with the same intensity that had captured her from the beginning. "And sometimes," she whispered back, "that's exactly what you need." His kiss was possessive, public, unapologetic. A reminder to everyone watching that some claims were permanent, some loves were absolute, and some dangerous men were worth every risk. Because 5 minutes could change everything. And sometimes that change was exactly what you'd been waiting for all along. If you enjoyed this story of dangerous devotion and fierce love, please like, share, and subscribe for more dark romance tales where protection becomes possession, and love conquers even the most brutal empires.